Dr. Wessels, what have you got for us today?
Hey, good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you
And
again
evening.
here. And is it evening? Well,
Well,
bless
it
our
is for some
hearts.
people.
Okay. Worldwide audience here. Fantastic. So, as Joe mentioned, it's my privilege to be here. We have how to sell into hospitals today, driving influence. This is an update. There's some brand new data in here. So, this is hot off the presses. And there are some key implications that I think we can discuss. Now, Joe, as this goes forward, I think you're going to be checking the chat and that sort of stuff. I have
You
too
got
many
it. Don't
windows
worry
open.
about it.
And then you're going to also interrupt and make questions, which is appropriate.
I'll be your host.
All right, so, golly, let's go walk into a hospital and let's see what the temperature is. Before
First, put
we
on your
walk in,
mask.
no, first put on your mask and try not to walk into it because it's like walking into a radioactive tunnel. The longer you're there, the more likely you are to be harmed by the exposure. But some of us do have to walk in there, so be careful. And and there you go. Try not to look threatening. So post COVID, things are looking a little bit better right now. Okay, revenues are up 16% year to date. Now that is in the aftermath of a few of these waves and reopenings. There was a lot of pent up demand in the early part of this year, so things were flying. Hospital margins last year were abysmal, and you can see the holdover of that on the next thing from Kaufman Hall. But they've recovered also. There's been a strong focus on operational excellence, sticking to the basics. They've also moved to remote work in a lot of places, sold some of their buildings. It's a economizing environment. Now, what's cool about the CARES Act is it's actually made a remarkable difference in shoring up our healthcare infrastructure. And it was very important to do that because we all learned how fragile one of our biggest and most important safety nets, i.e., healthcare, was last year. It creaked, cracked, and almost broke. And then it just continued to stumble and fumble and have a problem. We had engineered healthcare into a factory model to such an extent that we were doing just-in-time inventory, and we are still paying for those logistical problems that come from having things shipped over here just in time. And I get it, right? It's good economics, it's good business management, but this is a safety net organization. A hospital is there to be the stop for you when you are at your worst, your weakest, and your most vulnerable. So we did a bad job of that as a country, and we're trying to figure out how to do it again while we don't bankrupt the system also. And here's what that looks like. So CARES funding actually improved things and helped shore things up. We're expecting a few things around consolidation to happen in the next couple of years as this goes on. But there's also a right sizing that's happening. So if you look at Kaufman Hall, does a great job on this stuff. This is actually right these days, and they're actually making forecasts based on data from this quarter. In fact, on the quarter transition from September, October. So really good stuff. But as you can see there on the left, guys, without CARES Act, overall, median hospital margins were rather negative. And I removed the scale on here because it doesn't really matter. The 3%, these are small percentage numbers. But, it nicely recovered around March when people started coming back in. So if you've been in the devices business, you're selling to hospitals, you noticed this. You saw that January was awful and February was worse. And people are going, oh, well, it's because of the procedure volumes and the indicator, a leading indicator for hospitals. You're actually seeing the results of people coming back reflected in the margins a month later. So my device company clients were hating January, but February things there was much less in terms of moaning and groaning in February. Many more opportunities, a lot more procedure volume, and a nice kind of U-shaped recovery in some sense. But it's a little scary right now because of the Delta variant and maybe Lambda and a whole bunch of other stuff. And this and look, if you let me be clear, my opinions are my opinions. They are informed.
And
They are not,
strong.
and they sometimes are loosely held. But on this one, I don't know if we're going to have too much disagreement. But if you are not vaccinated, I've lost a little respect for you. It is, if you understand science at all, you're not going to dodge this thing.
Oh,
If you can put, go ahead.
I have to interrupt only because I was beating that drum and you weren't here the week that we had two ER doctors on. One of them was in the hospital at the time. And he said, sorry, I'm late. I just had to intubate a husband and wife who were not vaccinated. And at the end of the call, I said, I told them a story about how I came close to losing a friend, not fatally, but emotionally, because I kept badgering about the vaccine. And he said, you're ignoring all of this and all of that. And I asked them, should I stop? Should I stop using my voice, however large or small it is, to persuade people? And they said, yeah. They said yes because they're members of their own family aren't getting vaccinated, and there's no amount of, So one of the thing that really stuck with me is the physician who had just intubated someone said, "This is what I do. If the patient survives, I say to them, if you regret at all having not been vaccinated, my only request is tell someone you love." And he walks out of the room
That is
because
exactly right.
he said, "There's no one's going to listen to me, but they will listen to someone that they love and almost lost."
Look, and on the front end of this thing, I'm pretty good at statistics. I had to be so that they would let me escape the doctoral program alive. But I looked at this stuff originally, and I'm like, no, 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 this is a little overblown. The data that was being published and stuff, I'm like, this is a low occurrence event if you're healthy and that sort of stuff. All the things that were there, just be careful. Put on a mask. I don't really care, but go about your business. Then more and more of this stuff happened. I'm like, oh, yeah, I was wrong. I was wrong. So we took all the proper precautions. That's the thing about science and data. It is fluid. You're going to find your path forward based on the evidence that's there. Now, the people who are, I think, unaffected by reason and science make these decisions based on emotions, which is how we all make decisions, and you'll see a little bit more about that in a minute. But the way that people have gone about this has resulted in many of our red states. People go for misinformation, personal opinion, or whatever else. They're not going to do it. And in those places, and the data show it's actually distributed across some of these places, geographically not uniform. Length of stay has gone up around 5%. And that's a very big problem because labor expenses are growing faster than volume, which means it's more expensive to put the same person to generate the same amount of patient care. More expensive. Your labor cost as a percentage of net revenue is gone up. That means efficiency.
It's not just wages. Wages haven't materially changed. That's not the
No, but what we're doing is we're having a great shortage of people, so we have to replace nurses, allied health professionals, doctors, and others with per diem labor, which is 1.5 to 2 times more expensive. And this is becoming a persistent trend, not something that is idiosyncratic or here or there.
Mm-hmm.
So the labor expenses are growing fast. This great resignation is affecting the general economy-ish. But in healthcare, it's not the great resignation. This is what ZDogg MD, right? Zubin Damania keeps talking about the moral injury that we've suffered as healthcare participants out there, watching all this mayhem and then just this frustration of a system that just falls asleep and goes, you got to have an answer, right? You have to have a response. Hospitals are required to have a disaster preparedness if they get fined. I mean, what most of them did is they bought a notebook for 30 grand, stuck it on the shelf. Well, luckily they've been able to grind down on supply costs. Oh, wait a second. Drug costs, supply costs, device costs, all these things have gone up because of the logistics snafu, but also because of the difficulty in getting enough labor out there to produce the stuff that we need. That's where the Great Resignation has been affecting us as an industry as well. The result of this is the median operating margin over the last 2 quarters has trended down by around 20%. 1/5 of margin is getting taken out. And that's a result because patient volume has now trended downward over the next these 2 quarters. This is a big problem because a hospital has fixed cost infrastructure of a certain amount, and they cannot overcome that unless they bring in revenue. They don't need to make profit necessarily, but this is a cash flow business. They can get more, but they have to have cash to fund this stuff. And as volume goes down, top line revenue goes down. That means we get into a crunch and things get a little bit scary. So, yeah. Here's a couple of numbers for you. So, this is really great stuff. Gross operating revenue, less cares, 9% up, right? This is national averages year to date, 16% up. This is good stuff. It's declining right now. Same thing with bad debt. Bad debt's actually gone down too, and this is good because there's much more participation on the part of some folks in this place to get better insurance. And once more, there's a great overheated job market where we can't find enough people, so benefits are making their way back there. Not something you would have predicted ahead of time. Volumes, month over month, 1%, 1.5% down. Year over year, 7%, which is not as large as people thought, and it's only up 4%. This is not enough to make up for almost half of that disappearing over the last couple months. Discharges are down, and then operating room minutes, one of the prime drivers of revenue. Year to date, there was a 12% growth. That was in the first half of the year because of pent-up demand. Right now, we're down 5%. That's 1 in 20 cases that's not showing up. That's a problem. I heard this from an international... They're not showing up. Here's why.
Figurative. You don't mean I had an operation today and I'm just blowing it off.
No, what's happening is I'm not showing up for my knee surgery. I'm not showing up for... Now, what that means is my knee hurts and I'm not going into the doctor, getting diagnosed, and then getting it prescribed.
So I'm not doing anything.
But there's an additional segment that is getting the diagnosis and declining the treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Defer, delay, or decline.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? One of the internationally known brands in healthcare. They are one of the clinics. Okay? There's health systems that are called clinics. Luckily, there's just a few of them.
Some of them are located in Ohio.
And some of them are located in Florida, Arizona, but anyway. They ask their doctors to cut back surgery time this month by 6 hours. Across the board, the amount of OR time that they would support for doctors to do procedures has to go down by 6 hours overall. So they just spread the pain everywhere. They then came back and said, you know what? Let's make that 5 days.
What?
Yes. So earlier this year, they came to doctors and said, we need you to drop 6 hours of OR time. I'm just going to kind of constrain you a little bit. They came back this quarter and said, we're taking out, and the busiest time of the year, the end of the year, we're taking out 5 OR days for you. You can't have as many OR days as you had before.
I don't understand.
I'm a doctor, and I go to Joe Hage Memorial General Hospital. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I have privileges. Even if I'm a staff physician, I have, let's put it on a monthly basis, 2 days a week that I do surgery. So I have 8 days. Now, that's a normal guy. Some of these guys are high procedure volume, and this is in a high procedure volume device area, so it's relevant.
Okay.
So let's say those guys are in surgery 3 days a week, 2 days a week, they say patients, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or whatever, right? For those high volume doctors, the ones who are the profit center, as you see the operating room minutes going down, that is not because we don't have necessarily the volume this quarter. The reason that's happening is we don't have the labor to support the OR procedure volume. So we're basically cutting hours, and now we're cutting hours in terms of days because we cannot deliver safe healthcare there. This is an internationally known health system that has dropped a tremendous amount of procedure volume in the busiest time of the year. They've actually had international patients be turned back. Sorry, we're not going to do it now. We'll refund your airfare. Come next year.
David, I think you just answered your question, but to paraphrase then, Doctor, I need you to spend less time because I can't support it with my staff.
That's right.
Wow.
So you got a surgeon now that's losing $100,000 of earning power, or the better part of $100,000.
Because he works for a system now and he can't go outside or it doesn't have...
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's working for a system, he's missing his bonus. He's missing his, all that sort of... She's missing her bonus. She's missing these things. The volume
is... He's not going to act.
They can't do anything.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, I'll be callous here. They may be pissed, but they're some of the richest people we know.
You need to meet more people, bud.
Maybe I'm not hanging out with the right people. I'm not hanging out with the
Elon Musk is worth $250 billion. Now, I don't know him, but we're actually talking to a part of his organization about another project in value-based care.
Okay.
Rural.
Let's go to the next. And by the way, this is one of the reasons, folks, why I keep asking Gunter to come back, because I don't know of any other consultancy or general smart gals and dudes that mind this kind of thing, because we just take our wares and we say, I've got to sell this widget. And we are pretty oblivious to what the hospital's issues are today. We know that things are bad, but we still have to sell and we have a number to hit. And
That's right. So the idea for hospitals is you need to grow or else, right? Now there are sources of great revenue, right? The boomers are now, many of them are Medicare eligible. Medicare is still a pretty darn good payer. Private pay is actually coming back with a vengeance. It is much more expensive these days, but there are signs of moderation in the costs, but their payment rates are quite good. And there you go. That's really interesting, right? Surgeon insurance is $150 a year. That's approximately what, 12,000 a month. And yeah, you lose that. That's a problem. Of course, the health system pays for that now. So there are still sources of good revenue out there that are untapped. And what we're having is a lack of there's a lack of a coherent or pleasing experience that patients can engage in to consume healthcare that they need. It is scarier. And when they walk in, happy staff make happy patients. Well, they're suffering from a moral injury. So we've got this cascading series of problems that's just putting a pretty strong headwind into what we need to be doing. And healthcare overall as an industry is growing because of the force of demographics. So we've got a pretty interesting time here. And then, patient engagement's needed to drive down the cost. And so how am I going to be engaging to my patients? Well, let's give them an app. Let's put some more billboards up. Let's have a community event so we can have a super spreader event. This is still possible these days, but patient engagement's needed. And so one of the things that is important for us to do in this part of the market is to segment and qualify. They look the same, hospitals look the same, but if you look below the covers, the people who sit there and go, we're doing just fine, thank you, that's okay. You need to trust but verify. In today's market, if you take nothing else away, we started with data. You need to be informed about the financial performance of your customers before you open your big fat mouth and tell them all of your value propositions. Because they're not going to be listening unless it's relevant. So it's our job to shape that message in a way that gives them this approach that is more relevant. Now, we're doing just fine, thanks. We've heard this all the time. I've heard this other thing, too, where it's like, let's say we've ended the device world. This is perfect. We're still in a pathway where we have to engage physicians in upgrading their technology, engaging in, value analysis and a variety of these other things to get good stuff on the shelf so that when those cases show up, they can be dealt with, or when the patients show up, they can be treated properly. All of those things are severely challenged these days because the doctors are now in this environment listening to administrators saying, I really hear you, doc. Really cool. But I'm going to need like a white paper and a bit more evidence before I decide that widget B is better than the widget we already have. There's an example that I have here, and I'm going to generalize it again, another device company we're working with. And the salespeople are hitting into this wall just continuously. We're doing just fine, thanks. We don't want to, it's COVID, an excuse of the week, whatever. We don't want to talk to you. Why? Supply costs are up. I don't need more reps in here. Where's it written that reps increase your costs necessarily? Yes, it's associated. There's a correlation. We have a bad history where we have, as an industry on the supply side, used every tactic possible to add cost to the supply side because that's margin. Now, it doesn't mean that we're adding cost to the care. It just means that we're trying to boost the amount that we're putting in supplies. And this is a great idea because really good supplies cut overall care cost. But the supply chain manager doesn't look over there. They look down here. Oh yeah, this line item price, this is it. And so let's get another vendor in here and let's have a goat rodeo. Everyone will play with all the little things. And goat rodeos are really just not very fun to watch. I mean, the clowns fall off and the goats, it's horrible. Horrible. But that's what a bake-off usually looks like. And, the clowns and the goats don't ever end up with a winner. So then it comes back down to the preference of whoever's in, and so this is a whole lot of kabuki theater for a new sale that may or may not happen.
That was a lot. You introduced goats, baking, and kabuki. We need to kind of zero in on one analogy, I think.
No, this is important because it allows people to imagine the scale and scope of the chaos that happens when we do this sort of stuff. But thank you. I appreciate the feedback. I'll write it down. We'll see how it goes.
Yes, I know you will.
So,
adding value.
When
all week, ladies and gentlemen.
When the device company can actually stand in front of an administrator and say, here's what the cost of care is like, this goes extremely well. But getting that level of attention is really difficult. Mm-hmm. So value analysis is trying to catch up with the resource constraints and all those sorts of things, and they're having a very hard time keeping up. So here's what we have told these reps to say to their doctors. One of these products actually improves the patient experience and mitigates pain. It's an area that you put and you alleviate pain and improve physiology, okay? And the difference is multiple analogies work. Thank you, Stephen. Read what Stephen said, Joe.
I see that multiple analogies work for multiple.
I think that guy my kind of guy.
And Ekberg here writes, who writes his material? GW is on a roll.
Who writes his material?
Should not be discouraged. When did it become the H basket? This is my show, guys. Just back up.
Yeah. I'm just a guest. What do I know? So the thing reduces pain and discomfort and improves physiology. Now, the doctor could, on one hand, be sitting there going, okay, I don't want to put my patients in pain, but the supply chain guy sits there and says, well, this one's a little cheaper. Why can't you use that one? And they throw it in value analysis and they say, why wouldn't this one work? And the answer is it will work. I mean, it's a little bit of discomfort for the patient versus this one, but, this is acceptable, right? That's what happens in these value analysis situations. Okay, cool. As a rep walk in and say, and this is what we told them to say, and go, hey, doc, is it worth, would you, just for instance, would you take $100 to endure some avoidable pain for, I don't know, let's say 2 weeks? No? That's exactly why you need to move to this device, because that's what your patients are forced to do because you don't have this supply on the shelf. Doctor typically responds, well, that's sure, but, administration wants me to bring in, some evidence and stuff. So I need a white paper. This is a new product. I don't know about a white paper. I think it works, but they're not taking my word for it. The next thing we've trained them to do is go, hey, doc, let me ask you another question. Do you understand how much of a contribution you make to this organization in terms of net cash and profit? Would it surprise you to know, based on our analysis, that you are you and your department are one of the primary profit drivers for this institution? Now, you better have your data right, but this is actually the case in this case. So let me ask you this final question, doctor. Do you think it's appropriate for an administrator to ask you as a physician, in your professional opinion, to submit to some marketing hacks white paper before it's a good idea?
Gunter, you're the one who taught me that to sell anything into a hospital, you need to have clinical support, operational support, and financial support.
Correct.
You're talking to the doctor. That's all clinical. And you might even make a financial argument at the doctor, but you're still going to need him to go or her to go into the value analysis committee and convince them. And white paper's not the thing. These are
the statements from the doctors. I need a white paper, at least a white paper.
Yeah.
And my question to the doc in response is, are you kidding me? How on earth, as a licensed healthcare professional, the one people trust to not die, would you have an administrator say to you, give me some marketing crap before I decide? And by the way, I have a couple degrees in marketing. Some marketing crap so that I can make a decision. It's a non-sequitur that makes no sense. But what happens in this environment is that people are stressed. They're in this moral injury. They're lulled into this stuff. They're under a lot of pressure and pain, and they're going, we got to break through. We got to break through. And so I've brought you some spicy meatballs to taste and see how you potentially could break through in this environment.
Good.
And by the way, I just got a breakthrough text. Somebody wants me to write a white paper.
Really?
Ain't happening.
Eddie, real quick. He's on a roll, of course.
All
What do
right,
you
Eddie,
want?
go ahead. No, we can stop and
No,
start.
I didn't have any questions. I don't know why you
You
invited me
raised your
on.
hand.
All right, Eddie, what do you got?
Oh, no, I didn't mean to. Sorry, that was
Don't push that button, Ed. You ruined everything. Ugh.
Well,
Okay,
Eddie,
to my film editor, can you edit out this part? Come on, Ed. You've been on these calls before.
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I like him, but I like Steven better.
Yeah, I know.
We've only just met, so
I know.
anyway, it's good guys. We really enjoy the group of people, and I'm so happy to be part of your network because the people you've assembled around are just an amazing assortment of excellence in so many different areas. It's great. It's really
I don't
great.
disagree with you.
All right, so how do we break through? How do we get this beautiful maze of things to do? All right, so this is healthcare. We're going to take a small little tangent and loop right back around to how you do this. But now we have to get back to the people that we're talking to. Since we're selling devices, since we're trying to sell the hospitals, how am I tactically, practically going to do that? I'm going to tell you, but I got to remind you of a couple things first. Okay? The first thing I want to remind you of, and this is something you may have forgotten, but your biology affects your attitudes. No, not your heredity, not your genetics, but the actual biology. Remember those of you who took biology in college or couldn't avoid it, the main thing in biology is homeostasis, right?
We have a clinical psychologist on the call right now. I can bring her on if you need any backup on this.
Okay.
Okay.
No, so we'll chat. So it affects your attitude and your persuadability. It's actually physiological stuff happening in your brain. And this is an important facet for us to think about if we're trying to break through. How do I do that? Well, first of all, engagement's not enough, right? We do not get enough attention to make a difference if we're standing there talking about all the wonderful things, right? We got this device. It cuts pain for patients, and it's really neat, right? No, Doc, how would you take $100 to suffer? That's a pain dominant statement. The first statement is not. The first statement is a gain dominant statement. And we are twice as motivated and twice as engaged by pain avoidance as we are from gain approach. But today, and in more and more competitive markets where information overload and all of these other things are happening, we need to go for something that's a little bit different. And you're going to love this, Joe. We're looking for arousal. Arousal is not just warmies for someone else. It is also activation or energizing of the individual, getting them fired up. So when you're fired up about something, you're aroused, okay? In sales and marketing, our job is to induce arousal to break through this huge barrier that COVID has created for us. I need to get that action level way, way higher before it's actually going to clear the hurdle and the moat and all the walls and so forth. And see, that is a mixed metaphor again.
So working with this audience.
Clear the hurdle and clear the moat and the wall. Yeah. We could even make that.
Earlier I referred to these as analogies, and I was even wrong on that. They're closer to similes than metaphors. Just move on.
No, Joe. Look, I've known you how long now? It's like
it's been a decade.
It's been a minute.
Plus.
It's been a minute. Sometimes your vocabulary isn't where it needs to be.
Go on.
I apologize for that, but I just it's a you've not earned that. That's my bad.
Yeah, you've got some grammar issues on your site. Let's move on.
It's gonna be getting better.
I know you've been saying that.
I know that's what. And hope is not a
strategy.
strategy.
Gentlemen, Gunter was my very first client.
Yep. And look at him now. He's worse off. So, angriness. Being anger. Angriness, is that a word? See?
Anger. Tell me again about my vocabulary. Let's move on.
I was that's why I did that. So.
No, you didn't.
Yes, I did.
Go on.
Angriness and these sorts of things actually hit your physiology. Your autonomic nervous system gets kicked into gear. You feel this warmth or this agitation or any of that. You begin to shake. Right? Anxiety causes it as well. Rapid thoughts. And what happens is when we get keyed up or fired up too much, we actually start doing really dumb things where we run the opposite direction. So Why would arousal be good for us? Well, if we can cause it and shape it, we have a strategic advantage. So the cycle of what we'll call involvement, and sometimes this is called ego involvement, but it is a level of arousal, and this is for doctors, this is for administrators, this is for significant others, this is for kids. It goes that we want to get higher involvement, so we start with whatever the stimulus is, and then we see whether or not that can be arousing. Does the autonomic nervous system kick in? Now, what that does is it causes non-conscious action, emotion-driven decision-making, and the decision we want is to pay attention. That's what I want. The decision is I'm going to pay attention, and pay attention is appropriate because it is costly. Mentally, those resources, it's costly to pay attention. So we get the arousal up, attention follows, but the attention is about quick decisions. Avoid, approach, hold still. Okay? The decision we want is for action. I want them to act or react on the stimulus I've introduced as part of a marketing or sales campaign to engage with this individual. And then there's this action. So what happens when we have a good deal of arousal in an individual we're trying to influence is their decision results in action very quickly. It's an unfair advantage for someone. Now, I'm not saying we be evil or manipulate people, but we do need to bring them things that are meaningful and relevant that causes a physiological reaction. That is not too much to ask. This is, after all, healthcare. This is life and death. Action is done to stifle or energize either the positive or negative arousal. So energize the positive, stifle the negative. Then we return to normal after we've done this sort of stuff, and we wait around for another stimulus. So most people sit there in this kind of hang loose period for a long part of a day, and then as a result, wait for whatever other stimulus is there. And this is where your customers are sitting there on a low arousal basis. They are just tired, they are sore, and they are in pain. I saw a question pop up, and then it went away. It was a good question.
No, it was Eckberg praising you for your metaphors.
Well, keep it up. I need encouragement.
I'm encouraging you. Please move on.
You encouraged me to move on. I agree. So 2 more stops before we open it up to discussion and go round table. The attitudes we stimulate then are the way we leave this and create that. So this is about gaining and regaining, maintaining attention. To break through, it's not good enough just to break through, scare them, and then they do something like run away. I want them to begin to create a more lasting change, and that's where the attitudes that they have to certain things come into play. So higher involvement creates a polarization. The example I use in training when we're training people on this is we put a scenario up that is an aversive racism scenario.
Sorry?
Aversive racism, which means I'm not in my own mind a racist, but then I get tricked into doing something that exposes the fact that, society is unfair. And so then I have a negative reaction to that, and I become highly aroused and have a hard time processing more information. And this is why people get into all kinds of arguments about DEI and red state, blue state, and all this sort of stuff. These are high involvement issues that are polarizing. Low involvement issues are apathy creating. Nobody gives a care. Mm-hmm. But attitudes vary based on their involvement, and we actually show you which attitudes you're trying to create, which will have that long-lasting open door. Let me give you a quick example. In many of our personal relationships, we have done things that have helped people in times when they were more or less vulnerable, or more or less needy, or more or less in a spot where they needed some kind of support, right? In those situations, lasting relationships happen because an attitude change has happened, and the attitude is, you're okay, I accept. It's an attitude of acceptance and approach. That actually lasts, and it's something that you and I share. We were both pretty new in our respective companies when we met each other, and we met each other over social media, which, by the way, that's actually cool now, but when we did it, it was a little newer, right? We decided to work together before we met even in real life. That's quite COVID appropriate a decade early, right? So, but that attitude persists, right? So when Joe calls me, I'm kind of, to Ron Burgundy, I'm kind of a big deal. I'm actually not a big deal, but I have a really full calendar because I have a real big problem delegating. It's a personal failure. So when Joe calls, he gets through. When Dwayne calls, I'll answer. I might not answer Joe or Dwayne as quickly as I'd like to, but I'm going to get back to them because we have a great relationship. I have a strong positive attitude towards them, and it endures. Attitudes have a longer lasting effect than arousal does. So we use this pathway to get people engaged and involved. They change their attitude, and now we have that going for us. We then have the benefit of retaining and maintaining attention with our clients. So the key here is when we're engaging with our clients, we need to make sure that we are not spending our time on either end here looking for involvement that says, it's great, you'll love it, I'll make you a hero. Or gets people to stop and go, I'm just going to back away from this. What we need to get people into is a situation where they reinterpret their current situation in a way that helps them avoid the negative consequences of staying what they're doing and therefore improve their situation and maybe even improve things better than normal or better than they should be. This is our task, and involvement is the key to getting this done and activating priority. We take all this stuff and map it down onto hospital priorities, their defaults, their all that sort of stuff when we dig into this a bit more deeply. But at the end, the highlight concept is get people to start avoiding some of the pain they're living with, because they're living with a lot of pain. This requires us, though, to be a bit more provocative. Now, this doesn't mean unbutton, run around, and get tackled by security, right? That's not exactly. You could, and that would be provocative. But it would actually get you to arouse a response from probably the wrong buyers, okay? But we do need to be provocative in having them reinterpret, re-understand, or re-engage with their current situation and not just sit there and suffer. We are not a third world country. We are not in an economic crisis.
Yes.
We are not, yet. We are not in all of these. We have the wherewithal to solve our problem. This is an extremely resilient society. And the hope that we have at Liquid Smarts, that we have for our society, is that we actually get serious about driving higher levels of education and better access to healthcare, because the two of those things are the foundation of human development. We've had really good healthcare that's just too expensive. We have really good secondary education that is also too expensive. We need to solve these things. And at Liquid Smarts, we're going to let the educators deal with themselves. We want to fix the thing that at this point in my life I'm most concerned with, because I'm staring down the barrel of a huge tax increase and a tremendous amount of pain and suffering as people consume healthcare in a non-satisfying environment. And it's for this reason that we actually spawned, and if you look at me on LinkedIn, we are working with some digital health startups, and we venture built a firm called Prop Health, which is a value-based healthcare organization. I found someone who is just awesome, and we're going with her to go take this over. Some really fun stuff. If you're interested in that, we'll be happy to chat with you. You should meet Gail Zott. She's phenomenal.
I'm assuming that was your last slide, so I showed it also. They can see Big Gunter.
Well, I had my email on the next one.
Oh, okay. Well, then let's put that back on.
Well, no, I just put it in chat. You chill out, dude. Just put it in chat. You chill out. I'm mixing metaphors.
Very effectively. I would like an example. It's Gunter at liquidsmarts.com. I'd like an example of, now I know some of your clients are some of the biggest names in medtech. First, are you doing everything virtually? And are you were saying that you're like taking a manufacturer's product and you're looking at a specific hospital system, for example, and pairing what their wants, needs, pains are and how to approach. What kind of, I'm sure they're positive, but can you give me some specific about, an approach that you spawned that the sales force adopted and found different results?
So some of the best tactics, strategies, remedies, solutions are very simple, and some of them are surprisingly old. Now, we promoted and succeeded in making an impact with our clinical utility, operational efficiency, financial performance triad that fits together, the trinity of these things, as a framework to communicate value. So we're known for value-based purchasing, value-based marketing, and value-based selling. And that's the template we utilize when we're doing this inside of healthcare. So when salespeople remember to start exploring, and this is just, it's not because anybody doesn't care or they're bad, or it's just busy. We're busy too. But, so hey, let me tell you about my product. And every now and then customers like, I've been waiting for you. Hey, thank God you're here, Joe. Hold on. Where's the music? Guys, the balloons. Joe Hage is here, right? This happens when you come over. When you come over. But when you go in, right, you don't have that massive positive situation. What you need to do is begin to purposefully explore the clinical deficits, the operational deficits, and the financial deficits that your customers are living with. That's all we need to do to be relevant. We need to be allowed to do that. So the stand-up, before that, how do I get in the door, is about how you can be a bit more provocative. So we utilize data to look for indications of pain points, and we'll ask questions instead of a generic one, which is not a bad one, which is like, what are your quality initiatives this year? What are your patient flow initiatives this year? What are your cost reduction initiatives this year? And what are your patient satisfaction engagement initiatives?
Who are you asking those questions of?
Anybody. I don't care if it's the person who's running the OR, the laboratory, radiology, supply chain, or an executive.
Who are actually capable of answering those questions?
Nope. They will, from the person pushing the broom to the CEO, can answer those questions instantly. Because it's been publicized, it's been pushed. It is. So if you're running a hospital, length of stay is going up. Do you think you're going to stand around going, well, I wonder what we could do about it? They're going to go, everyone, we need to cut length of stay. Treat them, street them, don't repeat them, get them out, come on. And the people pushing the broom are like, why are these people leaving so fast? Oh, we have an initiative to cut length of stay. Oh, okay. Well, what does that mean to me? It means you better push that mop promptly. Make it quick. We got to turn the room. Those sorts of things become more and more important. So those generic questions are okay, but a better question is, I've noticed that you're emphasizing oncology. I've also noticed that not only are your billboards there, but there's a rival and an oncology group in here. What are you doing to get your unfair share of patients from them so that your program can continue to grow and flourish as it is right now? How are you going to maintain this level of growth? How are you going to how are you going to innovate? And how are you going to make sure that as we become more mobile and as these international centers begin to spread around, which they are, branding is a big thing in healthcare, gains trust, gains preference, and all of that sort of stuff from patients. What are you going to do to stick around? And by the way, this works for a doctor and their practice, a doctor and their practice inside the hospital, a service line manager and their business line, et cetera, et cetera. So clinical, operational, financial.
This time I meant to come in. This time I really did mean it. So the way it took me a long time to think about to come to this, and you seem to be talking around. The way I approach it is anytime I'm trying to go and sell something, the person I'm selling to has a problem. And in a sense, what I'm willing to do is buy their problem off of them in exchange for what I'm selling them.
Where did you find this guy, Joe? That's perfect. I mean, it's an incredibly elegant way to frame it because we do know the script of buying. We ask a bunch of questions, right? And we know what our customer's supposed to do. So tell me, how many bolts does it have in it? Oh no, let me check. I'll get back to you. Yeah. But, so instead of doing that, ask the customer, so tell me, so how many patients are you losing?
Yeah. I know you're going to have to go and talk to your administrator about this. And here's why this is a good thing for you. Because then they're actually, you're providing them with the information to become your salesperson. Yeah.
What I like to is get them to buy the administrator's problem.
Exactly.
This is a really great. So we need to come up with a quick document, Edward, because I'm going to avoid stealing it from you. Shit, this is being recorded, isn't it?
That's all right.
Thanks,
2 weeks
Joe.
ago, Gunter, we had
really great, Ed.
I had to redeem myself from before.
You upgraded.
Next week, I'm gonna whomever we had scheduled for next week, we're gonna just push off. I'm going to have you instead.
We're going to give the microphone to Ed.
As-
This
as
one's
well,
mine.
so
You
two,
paint your own.
2 weeks ago, we had our friend Nick Anderson talk to us about health economics and things of that nature. And his main takeaway was a concept that I had not heard of before. Have you ever been part of or helped facilitate a payer advisory board?
Yes.
Okay. And my question for him, and he didn't know the answer, but you may, of course, a clinical advisory board is doing testing, getting empirical data and showing, clinical benefits. A payer advisory is going to help you with your financial. Is there any such thing as an operational advisory board?
Let me resituate that a touch. So the advisory board to the payer, the insurance company,
Correct.
right,
Yeah.
is there to help set medical policy, which is the rules for coverage or denial.
Correct.
These are not very many. I mean, they're prone to approve most things because they follow what Medicare approves, and that's a pretty good standard. So there's this vicarious R&D done at Kinko's, right? Copy what they're doing, right? Yeah. Now, the the payer advisory board is there to leverage things like Milliman guidelines and Hayes evidence or Hayes reports on what was known about this intervention, that intervention, et cetera, and what is the best way to do it from a health economic status point. So they read the health economics literature. They engage in, the latest studies in these cases, and much of the diagnostic, therapeutic, device, and pharma industry's contribution to healthcare, which should be better understood, is producing this clinical evidence. The clinical trial industry is all about advancing healthcare. We're doing it with the profit motive, and there is a grain of truth in saying that we need to continue that profit motive inside healthcare so that innovation is spurred by publicly traded companies that have to give returns to their shareholders. So they're taking bigger and bigger risks and doing more and more important things and being much more focused on these rarer areas and so forth to try and find growth. But the payer advisory board is sitting there trying to make sure that the payer doesn't look punitive in the way they've done it, and to make sure that they don't miss the right evidence that they would need to justify a policy for other doctors and so forth. Mm-hmm. We are deep in the prior authorization world with another client of ours, and this is all that does, which is check, recheck, and so forth on does it meet these rule criteria and all that. It is a mess, and there's a really great solution in that space. And so we're bringing that one to market.
Okay, so again, my question is, payers are helping all of the clinical, operational, and financial. If you can check these things in advance before you spend millions on your R&D and you're making something that people want and will actually buy, I'm not aware of anything that squarely addresses how do you check operationally if your ICU team is going to actually adopt transesophageal probes as opposed to the way that they're presently checking for.
This is one of the foundational flaws in the way we have adopted technology. It's not medicine, it's technology. So back again, Hayes ratings look at the evidence and efficacy and cost efficacies, the pharmacoeconomics or the deviceoeconomics, however we call it, the efficacy. So how much does the thing cost? What does the overall event, if we don't put the treatment into the marketplace, what does the event cost? Is the thing and its effect credibly less than what it is here? Or does it add substantially to the quality of life or the quality for adjusted life year gained or the quality for that individual? So cancer care, it's due more and cost more because we're fighting to extend life. This is a foundational human being. It's a human kind of yearning. How do we beat back death, right? Well, we're going to continue to spend in that space, but we want to spend on better interventions rather than worse. I mean, it's one of the myths that's out there is for us to sell something to a health system, they should spend less or something to that effect. No. Sometimes it makes sense to spend more because it's good for the race, the human race. Sometimes we have to do things like going green costs more than burning coal. A lot more. But it's kind of do we want to screw the planet much more? Right? Well, we got to spend more to undo the stuff we've done. So sometimes in healthcare, we need to spend more to extend life. But we want to know which things are the better uses of that precious money before we go ahead and endorse them and reimburse for them. And in that way, we drive actual medical practice through payment. So, and again, the next one you said here, and Stephen's pointing this out real well, is there you are. And I remember you. We had a great chat the other day.
Stephen, I don't remember having seen you on before, and I typically don't promote folks that aren't part of the MDG Premium Network, but you impressed Gunter before, and now you have another good point, so I thought that'd give you a chance to introduce yourself to the group.
No, thank you. Good morning.
Where are you?
I appreciate it. Yeah. So I'm
Where
out
in
in
the world
California.
did we find you this morning?
I'm in Orange County, California.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
He introduced me to a great data source.
Stephen did?
Yeah, I did. It was
Yeah,
a very kind. It was a great kindness.
Thank you. Yeah, Dexter. This is the conversation's apropos. I was on a couple of interesting webinars this week. One was hosted by the School of Business here at UCI in Orange County, and the CEO of a large IDN in the area was on, in addition to a director from Covered California, so our marketplace for healthcare, and a senator, all talking about this Gordian knot of healthcare and the healthcare economics issues that you're talking about, and so many, I would say, large tidal movements in the sea of healthcare going on. Payers and providers, a slew of folks moving into a Medicare Advantage. So to Gunter, to your point, our ability to marry the emotional element in our conversations with the data-backed elements, talking about how are you handling this flow of patients into the Medicare Advantage programs, which is putting a great deal of emphasis on the cost of care, right, and quality. Another big topic in these webinars has been value-based care, and people are going there. The inertia is increasing, the involvement in ACOs. So back to quadruple aim. Thankfully, CMS has made that quite easy for us in the technology provider world, right? Cost and quality of care, user and patient experience. Okay, you got those four down, great. To Gunter's point, generate conversations around those. To your point, the guy pushing the broom knows. The CEO from this large IDN was talking about how that moves all the way down through his organizations. Everyone knows what's important. I happen to be standing in the oncology radiology department of a local large hospital, and I walked by a bulletin board, and they had all their metrics up posted, reminding employees as they went by, this is what we're working on with patient engagement. This is what we're working on in quality of care. So it's, to Gunter's point, that's all the currency of our discussions now is all around that. And the back to human behavior and the amygdala and the frontal cortex, how do we marry emotion and intellect to move people forward in the decision-making process?
It's a really great point.
And since you're in Orange County, you'll have to at least come down for the keynote and reception in San Diego. I hope it's May 10th.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so keep that in mind, and I'll find you online, and we'll talk.
Thanks very much. Thanks for including me.
Yeah. So the technology adoption story, and this is one of those again, technology problems. You can buy process improvement with or without a piece of technology. You can buy it from the kids with the backpacks that were grown in the lab where they grow smart kids, right? And they all, they're all texting all the time, and they don't look people in the eye, but they've got serious analytical chops, and they collect data and they crunch it up, and here's your model, and ta-da, big money from Huron or from Navigant or from Deloitte or whoever else. Or you can buy a piece of technology from one of the device makers out there, because when you buy technology, you cannot buy it without distorting workflow. But as an industry, we're really not very good at helping our customers understand workflow, because we assume, maybe rightfully so, that workflow is a haystack of different approaches. Everything is this way or that way, and it's just all piled together. And it's not. Ever since the 80s and DRGs, we've been in a product line orientation to healthcare delivery. There are standardized, stabilized care pathways. Milliman will tell you what they are, right? Hayes will tell you what they're worth. And evidence-based medicine, back to the story about liability and health insurance, liability insurance costs, that right there, the standard of care is also known. So if I've got a standard of care and I'm reducing clinical pattern variation as a chief of medicine at XYZ health system, do you think I might have something to do with the discussion of operational workflow? Now, as a marketing organization, if we're talking to those folks, awesome, because they will generate the proof statements we need them to generate. Because on workflow, as you know, it is peer-to-peer spread, not we're going to publish this big paper or we're going to make a white paper. It's peer-to-peer. And in fact, a company has a great role in stimulating cross-organizational growth, support, and improvement by bringing users together and sharing best practices, or by creating a community, or by doing both of those things, or by attending 10X.
Thank you for that. We had, back when we were going to host this in 2020, you were going to cover how to immunize your business against a rapidly mutating market. Is that still going to be the best title for you for May? What do you think, Will?
You know, you ask these things as if I have a choice, Joe. I mean, you rewrite the titles here. I make a suggestion, you're like, that sucks. Like,
I didn't say
probably.
I just said it could be improved slightly.
Yeah, you said that sucks, and I'm like, okay, well, what should it be? And you come up with something
I'm going to say
completely
a
different
post-COVID market.
But it's a catchy little, it's catchy. I mean, that would stimulate people's interest. Not the 22 or 29 or whoever.
It's Gunter. Say hi. And set up your radio. I'm on a call.
Da-da-da-da-da. So, yeah, mutating and changing environment. I like that.
Hi, how you doing?
Well, hello.
Long time.
It has been. My daughter still has that blanket that y'all got her, Jim.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. It's beautiful.
Wow. That's how old
She's
now?
10 now.
No.
Yep.
Wow.
It's been a minute.
Yeah, I know. Exactly.
How old is your eldest?
Well, so I have 5 now, 2 by contract, 3 by biological provenance. But my eldest daughter,
biological one is the one I was referring to.
Yeah, she is 15.
Okay.
And her younger sister is 13, and then the youngest is 10.
Okay. Wow. And those by contract are how old?
17 and 21, going on 22. Nursing student, eldest daughter, and then we've got a teenage boy that is playing in the playoffs today as a linebacker.
Wow.
Yeah. And what I like about football, really, in terms of establishing male dominance, is the fact that he gets beat up and then he tries to get all frisky. So I just poke him where his bruises are and he backs off.
Well, you've got a decade worth of college expense coming up, so.
I've got 4 weddings and 5 college educations. But the first one's going to be done with nursing school, so we're almost done with that.
All right, fair enough.
All right.
That's not what thank you. This is not what our great our great group of people were looking for, but nonetheless, it's a bit more disclosure, I guess.
Yes, and we appreciate it. So thank you for this. What is you said it in the middle of the call, but I'll ask you to repeat it. What did you say? If you remember nothing else from today, remember this.
You need to understand your customers' pain points by looking at the data. Understand what's going on at your hospitals before you open your mouth and say, "Hey, I got a great thing for you." Sometimes the best.
I know they. Go ahead.
Sometimes the best salespeople and marketers don't really understand their products very well.
Mm-hmm.
But they certainly understand their customer situations, and the customer tells them why the product's good.
I doubt this would eat terribly into your margins, but if you ever put together a list of these are the questions you should be asking before you open your big fat mouth, I think that'd be a really valuable resource for folks.
Cool. And invaluable, so it would be free?
I said a valuable. I didn't say invaluable. I didn't say free.
Look, Joe, you know this. We're a giver organization. We want to grow the pie and that sort of stuff. So if anybody has any needs around that, that's fine. I'll put it on my list. I'm right now finishing out the biology of persuasion for a variety of specific market niches. So the big part's all done, but we're doing all this stuff and we're recording. And and then the other thing, we're doing a bunch of value-based training for clinicians and for administrators of ACOs and so forth. So
before we part, where can folks, I mean, of course they can go to liquidsmarts.com, but do you have any kind of weekly cadence of podcasts or videos or?
That's coming up, but I've been blessed by having friends and colleagues in the marketplace like you, like Dwayne and others that we've been able to share, audience and thoughts with.
Have you done Dwayne's show yet?
Sorry?
Have you done Dwayne's show yet?
Yeah, it was a pretty, I think it was probably one of my worst performances. It went pretty well, but, I think I've underperformed that one here today. So, but yeah, we really liked Dwayne and we wanted to add some value and we did hear some good stuff. But yeah, we want to be in that
space. He wrote us
space.
Earlier, he thought that us playing off one another would make an interesting episode. So we'll see about that.
All right, we need to talk to
before we go is next week, I have my friend Al Di Rienzo coming, and he has a storied history in medtech. He has a new company that he's working on, entrepreneurial, and it'll be something like last week where you all pitched in and helped Anna think about how she might go to market. He's a bit more advanced than that, but I think the group would be able to come together and add a lot of value there. So I hope to see you then. Dr. Wessels, thank you very much. And I really appreciate you making the time.
Likewise. Be well.
All right. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
Bye-bye.